6, 7, 8.
In history class, we've always learned that the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima occurred on August 6, 1945 to aid in the end of the World War II. Another part of history that occurred leading up to the bombing of Hiroshima we typically don't hear about in our history class. The bombing of Hiroshima was so important that it overshadowed an event that took place once the bomb was delivered. An event filled with tragic loss, destruction, survival, luck, and tragedy was so important that a movie and books were based on the events of this. The USS Indianapolis departed San Francisco on July 16, 1945 with a top-secret cargo that aided in the end of World War II. This top-secret mission, the sinking of the USS Indianapolis, the rescue of the men aboard the ship, and the survivors all played an important role in the history of World War II. The USS Indianapolis departed San Francisco on July 16, 1945 with a top-secret cargo. It was so top secret that no one aboard the ship, not even Captain McVeigh, knew what was in the contents of the top-secret cargo. But little did they know that it was parts to the atomic bomb, with the code name Little Boy. It arrived in Tinian, a small island in the Pacific Ocean, on July 26, 1945, delivering Little Boy. Once the ship had arrived, it was giving orders to head to an island called Leyte, a province in the Philippines, for soldiers to train. Captain McVeigh was given orders to zigzag on their way to this island. But on July 29, 1945, Captain McVeigh ordered the ship to stop zigzagging. Shortly after midnight on July 30th, 1945, a Japanese torpedo spotted the USS Indianapolis and sunk the ship with 3 torpedoes. The ship was sunk in a matter of 12 minutes. Approximately out of 1,197 men aboard the USS Indianapolis, it is estimated that only 880 men made it alive in the water. But once they made it into the water, their fight for survival wasn't over. While in that water, the men encountered problems like lack of boats, lack of lifesavers, sharks, saltwater poisoning, prior injuries from the ship sinking, dehydration, and no food or water. After almost 5 days of the men in the shark-infested waters, a man by the name of Lieutenant Wilbur C. Quinn was the first to finally spot the men in the water. He reported back to let them know that a ship had sank and men needed rescue. They dispatched Lieutenant Adrian Marks, and he landed his plane against orders in the water. USSIndianapolis.org states that Lieutenant Adrian was able to save 56 men with his airplane. It took 7 ships to come to the rescue of the men: Cecil Doyle, Talbot, DeFelho, Ringnes, Bassett, Register, and Hollandia. How many men survived this tragedy once they were pulled from the water? Out of approximately the 1,197 men, only 317 were pulled from the water, which meant a total of approximately 880 men lost their lives at sea. Why were so many men lost at sea, and why were they out there for 4.5 days? Well, basically, the Navy forgot about them. A coded message was sent once the ship departed and headed to Leyte, and it came across to the receiver as garbled. But instead of asking again, they just let the message go. So basically, the Navy never realized the ship was supposed to arrive. And back then, the Navy didn't have a protocol for if a ship didn't arrive. Who did the Navy blame for this casualty? Captain McVeigh. Captain McVeigh was court-martialed and found guilty of not zigzagging in enemy waters. He was later cleared of his charges. The survivors supported McVeigh and felt as though he was innocent. They said McVeigh had not been informed of a ship that was sunk in the waters only days before their ship was sunk, and also McVeigh didn't have a destroyer escort for their ship. As of today, there's only a few survivors left, and they honored the men by every year in January by having a memorial service and also a reunion for the survivors that are able to attend and their families. According to IndyStar.com, an article called Closure Finally for the USS Indianapolis Survivors, as of July 2017, they listed only 19 survivors still living. One of those survivors went by the name of James W. Smith. According to WSAV3, an article titled World War II Vet Recalls Days Lost at Sea, James W. Smith was 21 years old at the time of the sinking. He had spent 5 days in the brig on a diet of only bread and water because it reported to the ship late when it left San Francisco. He was released only hours before the ship was sunk. James W. Smith is quoted as saying, "I would hear shark and then people would scream. I'd lift my legs high to keep them from getting me." In conclusion, the men of the USS Indianapolis played a huge role in World War II. For James W. Smith and the men aboard the ship, they never knew what was in store for them when they left San Francisco, dropped off the secret cargo, and headed out into the Pacific Ocean. Upon dropping off the secret cargo containing the atomic bomb, the USS Indianapolis was sunk, leaving the men aboard to fight for their lives and then to fight for the innocence of their captain and becoming part of World War II history. Soon there will be no longer any survivors left to tell their stories, and all we will have is books and movies to tell the history and the story of the USS Indianapolis.